equality. Wide skies.
I think as humans, we always need something.
There's something really beautiful about watching other people think.
Wellbeing is a term that most of us are familiar with. We know self-care and personal growth, in whatever forms they may take, are important aspects for leading fulfilled lives. In this episode, we explore creativity, coaching, and well-being as part of supporting ourselves and others to achieve positive outcomes. Welcome to Wide Skies. I'm Martin York.
And I'm Debbie Watt.
Very pleased to be able to introduce you to our guests for this episode. First of all, Beth McManus. Beth is a coach, psychologist, researcher, and illustrator, and is based in the northwest of England. She has a particular focus on human connection, well-being, and emotions as part of her engagements to support individuals and groups, and her values include authenticity, creativity, curiosity, empathy, and kindness. And next we have Lauren Bailey-Rhodes. Lauren has worked in employment support for almost 20 years. She currently works for an organisation that helps people in and out of work to deal with the ups and downs of life. Lauren started to practice yoga as part of rehabilitation for an injury, and she has since trained as a yoga teacher, and this is now an integral part of her role. And of course, my co-host, Debbie Watt, who is a vocational coaching psychologist and works with individuals and organisations to build resilience and achieve their chosen goals. She's also a founder member of the Be the Ripple movement, which has the mission of creating ripples of kindness to inspire positive change. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Delighted to be here.
Thanks, Martin.
So if I could start the ball rolling by talking a little bit about, in a different episode, in the first episode, we talked about the World Health Organization definition of well-being. But why is well-being so important to us as human beings?
For me, there's two different reasons why I feel well-being is important. The first one is the really obvious, like how you feel at that time when you're actively doing something which is looking after your own well-being, because it brings that nice feel-good factor. The other reason, though, is that it's more of that longer-term thing. It's so subtle we don't even know it, really. It's how we're then able to deal with the ups and downs that life throws at us. Mm-hmm. So if we haven't been doing all of that well-being care to start with, when things get rough, they're a lot harder to deal with. Whereas if we're already at a little bit of a higher level in terms of our own well-being, then life is still tough, but our ability to deal with things when they come along is much, much better.
Definitely. It's that resilience piece, isn't it? Being stronger with the challenges that we face.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was exactly the word that came to mind when you were describing that resilience. And I think that is so important and so valuable to us as individuals.
It's not just us, it's looking after those around us. So by understanding what is well-being and how to support well-being, we can be better to those we care for and work with.
Yeah, your own tank has to be full.
Yes.
Otherwise, you can't look after other people.
You can't care for others if you don't care for yourself first, definitely.
The other one I like as well is that you can't pour from an empty cup. So what physical and psychological effects does well-being have on us?
As a psychologist, kind of traditional psychology looks at getting people away from poor mental and physical health to a neutral point. So it's more about the absence of ill-being, if you like, than it is about well-being. And we've seen movement in the last sort of 20 years or so towards a field of positive psychology, which if people haven't come across it before is super relevant for what we're talking to today, because it's really the science of happiness. And I have to confess that when I first heard there was a science of happiness, as a slightly glib northerner, I just thought, I'll give over. No, I'm not interested in that. And now I'm very proudly rooted in positive psychology in my work. I've always had an interest in people being well and living happy lives, but it just took me a bit longer to come back round to it and realise it wasn't all just choose happiness and kind of those pop psychology slogans that you see. It's really about actually the neutral point is good. We want to get people away from ill physical and mental health, but why not look at where people are thriving, where people are doing really well? How do we learn lessons from those people? How do we get people past that neutral point into thriving, living happier lives? And there's some really basic stuff around well-being that just makes good sense that we should actively pursue it. We see people living longer, living healthier lives, making healthier choices, having better social connections. Basically, all the stuff that it takes to live a good life is contained in the wrapper of looking after your and others' well-being around you. It can help us to build community and social bonds with others. And it's interesting as well. So in positive psychology, when we think about happiness, it's kind of distilled into different, slightly fancy sounding versions of happiness. But the two main ones that you look at are hedonic happiness, and you might have come across hedonism or hedonistic behavior before, and it's kind of a similar piece. So it's really looking at people pursuing pleasure and enjoyment and choosing happiness from actions and doing things. But then we also look at eudaimonic happiness, and that's where we're really looking to try and build meaning and purpose out of the things that we're doing, the interactions that we're having, the work that we undertake. So for me, when I think about well-being and the benefits that it has, it's really that kind of eudaimonic. Hedonism has its place, right? But that eudaimonic piece is really about deeper connection to self, better self-awareness, self-understanding, self-compassion, all those beautiful things that actually just make sense that we should be looking at to live a healthier and longer, more enriched life.
And I think it's fascinating to have heard you talk about that, because that's something that I've experienced for the first time now listening to you. And some of the connections I can feel myself making are around emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence, and being aware of difference and value in it, and thinking about how you harness it more. Do you think there's something in here about lifelong learning and personal growth as well, about how they play into this?
It's difficult to separate the two things for me, because my work is largely centered around well-being of self and others. And I get a lot of personal pleasure and meaning from the work that I do in supporting others to be well. And my kind of focus is trying to help people to be well, to be healthy, to be happy at work. There is a container, which is that workplace piece. But people don't live their lives in isolation. You know, we talk about we've got a work self and a friend self and a personal self, but fundamentally that's the same person, right? So work stress might be being exacerbated by personal stress or stuff going on at home, or work might feel actually fine, but frustrations are leaking in from elsewhere that are making work situations more challenging. So the work that I do is very much intertwined with the well-being of other people, but as a result is absolutely linked with my own sense of purpose and well-being. I take a lot from helping others, so it's not a purely selfless endeavour to work in that space. I have to role model and hold myself account to the well-being theories and practices that I am recommending or using to support other people. Would be a really inauthentic coach or psychologist or consultant or whatever guise I'm working in if I was making recommendations to someone and then not living or having an intentionality around living a life that is also centered around personal well-being, self-development, growth.
You're right about that authenticity, and sometimes that bit can actually be quite hard. So one of the things that as a yoga teacher, when you're doing your teacher training, something that is drilled into you is once you start to teach, don't give up your own practice. But then the reality, when it comes to it, of having a job and also fitting the teaching in, is doing your own practice is really hard to shoehorn in, and you've got to be so disciplined to do that as well. But I do notice when I don't do it, but it always sits there as this little niggle in the back of my mind. It's finding that balance, and it really, really is hard. But in terms of like the lifelong learning, I think as humans, we always need something to just mix things up a little bit, and whether that's a new goal. So it could be one of my team has just run the London Marathon. 4 years ago, she hadn't put on a pair of trainers to actually run in, and now she's just done a marathon, and that was working towards a goal. And do you know what? You could still class that as learning, because she's had to learn how to do that, how to be a runner, whether it's taking on a new course and learning a new skill. It's the things that come along with that around the new friendships that you make. It's the sparking the things going on in the brain again. These are all so important to us as humans, not to just kind of stagnate, because I think as soon as you start to do that, other things start to disappear, like your motivation and kind of your interest in other things. So yeah, I think it's a really important thing.
I thought it was interesting, Lauren, when you were saying about it's obviously good for us to have new things to do in our lives and to learn and have new challenges and things. And there can be this challenge that some of us can be quite resistant to change, and it's how you try and balance those two things.
Isn't it hard?
Yeah.
Our approach at Transform Lives is that every single thing that we do is about choice. And so a really, really nice example that came up this morning is one of our groups has just finished. They've been with us for 10 weeks. And one of the participants, when they started, wouldn't put their camera on, they wouldn't talk. And when they finished last week, he joined on Zoom, he was smiling, he was chatting away with everybody. And he said his natural instinct in everything that he ever does is when he's given a choice is to run, and that he doesn't do it. But with us, he actually made the positive choice to stay. And we talked about that quite a lot this morning, about what was the difference? Why did he do that? If in every other circumstance, he's chosen to run. And we kind of boiled it down to the culture and the environment that we create right from the start when we meet somebody. That it's when we say choice, we absolutely mean it. But at the same time, there's that little gentle nudge and a reason why, and actually providing stories and examples of inspiration and why it has worked as well. So, showing people that other people have been in that situation and look where they are now because of these different choices they made and different paths that they've now gone along. It is a tough one because when people are stuck, that's a term that we use a lot. People are stuck. To get them to do something different or to encourage them to do something different is really, really hard. But baby steps, and I think creating that safe environment where they know that we've got them. Mm-hmm. Whatever happens, we've got them. And if that doesn't work out, we'll find something else.
It's creating these layers where you give people the virtual tools that they need, the confidence to be able to do things. Like you say, that safety net is incredibly important as well. You've been working for a number of years in helping people back to work, haven't you? Why did you become involved in this in the first place? What were the main drivers for you?
Do you know, Martin, if you'd have spoken to me at the age of 20 and said, I'd have been doing this, I'd have laughed at you. I saw my career making millions in the city and all the rest of it. However it happened, I ended up doing some learning support in a secondary school just to help out while I found my proper job. When I look back at it, it's an absolutely awful thing to say because it's such an important and vital job. But what happened was that the young people I was supporting kept opening up to me and they kept telling me things and they kept asking for help. And some of this stuff was deeply personal. And there was just something in that made me stop and think, this is clearly a gift. Sounds too glib a word or too overindulgent somehow. But if people are seeing this in me and feeling this safe space in me, then that's something really I should use and nurture and take into a career. So that was my route in. Connections was my next step. So working, again, continuing with young people, more predominantly those who had an awful lot of stuff going on. So, they weren't just, it's hard enough being a young person, but being a young person who's also homeless and pregnant. Yeah. Those were the kinds of young people that I was working with. And so every single one of those who I helped to get onto a training course, to get into a job, just amazing.
I can just hear it in your voice, what it means for you to do this and what you get out of it. I've been fortunate enough to know you for about 10 years now. And I can remember the first time seeing you dealing with a group of young people in a previous role in the same sort of capacity that you had. And I could see how you lit up the room and how they came to you. And I think to have that ability to be able to do that is something very precious. And I take my hat off to you for that.
That's a lovely thing to say, Martin. And do you know what? Not everybody is as lucky as us. Not everybody's got somebody else around them. We've probably got a dozen people that we can turn to at any point that if we needed some help. Some people haven't got anyone, and for us to be able to be that person is just incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, it feels like it's obviously a vocation rather than a job for you. And perhaps, Beth, if I could come to you as well, you're a coaching psychologist, and it feels to me like there's probably a similar sort of story as to what the draw was for you and why you decided to do this as a role. What was your main driver for becoming a coaching psychologist? And perhaps if you could explain a little bit about what that entails as well.
Yeah, so I don't know that I've got quite such a nice origin story as Lauren. I think it's a bit blasé to say I kind of fell into it by accident, but really my background is organisational psychology, which is similar to Debbie, so kind of all things workplace. And I worked in the NHS a few years ago in their organisational development staff engagement teams, and was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to have some coach training, some formal accredited training. So I did some internal coaching whilst I was working there, and then I left and became self-employed, and I still did a little bit of coaching, but it was never sort of a big focus of my work. My work was very much more on the consulting, wellbeing, team development, resilience, etc. side of things. I guess looping back to what you were talking to before around lifelong learning and personal growth, part of my own reflections on kind of what was important to me, there was just a little niggle around coaching that kind of wasn't going away, and I should do a bit more with this, and I didn't have any paid clients at the time. I was just doing some coaching as a volunteer for Queen Bee, which is part of the Pankhurst Trust service that helps women with some free coaching sessions. And yeah, it was just sort of not going away. I was looking at doing a more advanced course, and it just so happened that there was masters in positive psychology and coaching psychology. I'd got to the point now of actually recognising positive psychology as something really relevant to me and not just something that sounded a bit naff, and it had the coaching elements. So I started that a couple of years ago, and really quickly, it's just a space that I'm really comfortable in. It's something that I'm really good at. There's something really beautiful about watching other people think. I also have a tendency, which I think I recognise in quite a lot of people who work in the wellbeing space, I sometimes have a bit of a tendency to want to fix or to want to solve or to want to offer solutions for people. And coaching's a really beautiful way of still offering support, but without kind of intruding by putting my own thinking or my own needs or my own assumptions into that person's space. It's really empowering another person to use their experience and their knowledge and their thinking and their networks to get unstuck, and you're there very much as a thinking partner rather than as someone who is bringing solutions for them. So it's a much more rewarding space for me to help people in than it is giving people a load of resources, which also has its role. There's a lot more of me in the resource giving. I'm choosing, oh, this would be a good resource for you, this would be a good way to help you, whereas in coaching I am really trying to support people to get there by themselves, but with really high level of support. I guess most people will come across coaching. There are some misconceptions about coaching in the way that I do it, and also with sports coaching you probably would be offering a lot more guidance and direction and helping to set goals, whereas what I do, which is more aligned to life coaching, but I only work in workplace settings or to talk to people about their work and their careers and their lives come into it, but it's definitely work focused. The only real difference between coaching and coaching psychology is that there is an intentionality around bringing psychological theories and underpinnings into my process. It might not always be overt, but it's always there in me as the coach, and I believe that who you are is how you coach. I'm fundamentally a psychologist, so that shows up in the way that I approach things. It's as simple as that, really. For me, all coaching is psychologically grounded, but not all coaches work intentionally with psychology as part of their process. So it's just really bringing that intentionality for me that kind of creates the difference. And obviously the theory and the research-based, evidence-based is really important to me.
Debbie, you're also a vocational coach and psychologist. What got you into that? What was the drivers for doing that as a vocation?
I kind of stumbled into coaching. So after I left my degree in psychology, I worked for a lovely charity that supported disabled adults to achieve the lifestyles that they wanted. I was a person-centered facilitator, which at the heart of it was coaching. And I did that for a number of years. And I loved traveling alongside my clients as they achieved the lives that they wanted. But one of the biggest things, because I'm working in pan disability, one of the biggest things was work. It was often out of people's reach. And so I really saw the benefits of work. I supported people into meaningful work as well. And so when I went on to get a bit more training, I went down the occupational psychology route like Beth. And I just really find a passion for work and supporting people in the workplace, because ultimately it's such a big part of our life. Like, work gives us our sense of identity. It gives us our friendship groups often. It gives us meaning. It's such a big part. And so my coaching psychology, really, like Beth, I'm a psychologist first, so I bring that in terms of methods. And like Beth, I'm very interested in the work side of things, mainly really because I could see the benefit to people. And that's what's kept me here, traveling along people to make better lives.
Beth, if I could perhaps come back to you as well. On your website, you mentioned about coaching with creativity in mind. Could you tell us a little bit about what that means and what that entails?
I suppose, full disclosure, it's just mainly my attempt to be slightly clever, because I am a coach and a psychologist and an illustrator. So it's just trying to bring those three things into one neat strapline. The mind piece is the reference to the brain psychology. But again, going back to that thing around who you are is how you coach, how I turn up. Whilst there's an intentionality of me not intruding into my client's content, I have to show up as who I am. I have to turn up and perform as a coach based on who I am as a person. So that creativity is fundamental to how I see the world, how I interpret information. I'm very visual, so I will often offer a visual. So if someone's describing a situation to me, I'll get maybe like a nice visual metaphor that I can share with them that might help them to see it from a different perspective, or to build on, or say, actually, it's really not like that at all. It's more like this. And then there's also my research that I did as part of my master's in positive psychology and coaching psychology was about bringing creativity into the space of coaching supervision. And there's some things in the woodworks for me about building on that research, doing a bit more formal research, and creativity as a fundamental part of the coaching process is kind of central to some of my thinking there. So the short version is it's just my attempt at being a bit clever. The longer version is it just describes the three things that I bring together to do my work as a coach.
You've also been experimenting recently with holding coaching sessions in unusual and creative spaces, haven't you? And how have they turned out?
Yeah, really good. And again, I think coaching typically takes place in workplaces or kind of therapy rooms, and they can be quite sterile environments, which is great in terms of it being a neutral space. But I was really curious. There's research about kind of whether you have artwork on the walls in your office versus not, and how it stimulates people's creativity and ability to problem solve and reflect. So it's kind of grounded in some of that thinking, and also just being really curious about what the environment in the space, what the impact of that could be on the coach, on the coaching session. And also I've been really wrangling with this little sentence that keeps coming up for me around how coaching is about letting go. Like being a good coach is about letting go of your own ego. This is my playful way of looking at if I took someone to an art gallery and started a coaching session, but then left them in the space and removed myself physically entirely. I don't know that you could get much further from having your ego there, because actually I'm saying the coaching is still taking place without the coach being physically present. The container has been created between the coach and the client. And then the art gallery or the public space or whatever building it is does part of the work of the coach and helps the client, supports them in their thinking and their reflecting. And yeah, it's been very early days, very much pilot, not official research, but results have been really good. People have been able to access different perspectives. They've been really open to kind of working in the spaces in different ways. And every one of them has been a one-off session with someone that I haven't met before, but we've been able to do some quite deep work. There's something about being around creativity and public spaces actually that lends itself really nicely to reflections and thinking about what's important.
I was thinking how calming it was making me feel hearing about that. And it almost feels like it's drifting and merging coaching and mindfulness together, which sounds really quite beautiful.
Yeah, there's definitely a little element of that. So yeah, that's lovely that you picked that up.
On a number of occasions, I'm coaching with people when we've gone for a walk. And that's quite lovely. Taking people out of the traditional coaching space really does free thinking. And again, bringing those elements of mindfulness. But very exciting with art galleries.
I look forward to hearing more about how this develops. Thinking wider creatively as well, Lauren, if I could come back to you, we touched upon it earlier on that originally you started learning yoga from a personal perspective, didn't you? And now you teach it. And I guess that also has a certain playfulness and creative element to it as part of the well-being that you're providing for the people that you're engaging with and supporting.
It was an aspect I never really imagined or thought about when it came to yoga. In my head, you were given class plans and off you went. No, not at all. No, you come up with it yourself. And it does really, it nurtures that little creative side. And yeah, you would never class me as a creative person. It's not something that I would ever describe myself as. But that kind of sitting down, getting on my mat, and thinking about the people who are in my class, whether I'm teaching a class, like a group of people from Transform Lives who, very much it's gentle and it's nurturing, introductory kind of class, or whether it's teaching my class at the gym who sometimes I can be a bit brutal and make them work really hard.
Good, yes.
What are my goals? But then also a lot of that comes down to mood and how you're feeling physically, mentally, what kind of day you've had. And sometimes I'll have written a class and when I get in there, I just completely do something different anyway, because you feed off how everybody else is feeling as well. And how you felt when you wrote that class might be completely different to when you're actually delivering it.
Part of the work that you do at Transform Lives as well, you don't only engage with the individuals that are looking for going back into the workplace or securing a job for the first time. You also work with individuals that are going through significant life changes and with organisations that want to engage in the process, don't you?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and it's so nice to kind of be in a room of fellow coaches, because all the team at Transform Lives are trained as coaches. It's the best approach to working with anybody who wants to achieve any kind of change. The people that we work with, I've written it down when I was thinking about some of the questions today. We're celebrating every little success that person might make. So whether it's turning their camera on a Zoom session or whether it is actually getting a job, they're two poles apart, but we celebrate those equally. There is a part to play in that process from businesses and employers to understand and appreciate, like I mentioned before, that not everybody gets the same start in life, and that actually at any point, any of us could end up being on a course or a program like we deliver at Transform Lives. We don't know what's around the corner. Those bumps in the road, some are huge. You could end up having to quit your job and care for somebody for the next 20 years of your life. You might think it was only going to be 6 months, but actually it turns out to be an awful long time. And so we do an awful lot of work with employers who are brilliant, I have to say, in opening out their recruitment processes, opening their doors to things like work experience or volunteering or shadowing, any of those things, even mentoring people. And our big thing is about just creating those connections and those touch points between someone who's out of work and somebody who is in work. And that is one of our kind of little secrets to success, I think, around helping people to get jobs. So just a really nice example of that is, we'd work with the university, or we do work with the university in Liverpool. They hosted people in their different departments to give them some work experience. And now as a result, we're in double figures of people who work there. They never would have thought to apply for jobs in places like that. But because they've been there, they've realised they're humans that work in there and they're not all scary with a cap and gown and sashaying down corridors. Yeah. It makes a difference.
It really resonated with me when you mentioned about understanding the different experiences people have and the different starting points, because obviously that's the essence of equity in action, which is one of the key drivers for the work that I do as well. We're sort of coming towards the end of this episode now, so I wanted to ask you all a quick question, and this is really about self-care and well-being at the personal level. So if I could come to you first, Debbie, how do you look after your own well-being?
I think one of the biggest things as a coach I've learned is sometimes I have to take my own advice. Sometimes we don't look after ourselves so well. So one of the big things I did for myself was I enrolled on a course at the college on painting, so oil and acrylic painting. And giving myself that break to do that was brilliant. And that's been a hobby I've carried on with. But really looking at all my well-being. So, looking at your physical well-being, your psychological well-being, your social well-being, just making sure I'm touching base with friends, making sure I'm eating properly, exercising, etc. So really, it's just looking at my holistic health, my holistic well-being, the same as I'd advise one of my clients.
And Beth and Lauren, what's your favourite personal well-being or self-care tip?
Mine's really simple in theory, but quite hard to do, and it's sleep. Getting enough sleep, going to bed at a reasonable time, not sitting doom scrolling on the internet, either reading a book or putting some nice relaxing music on, or whatever it might be. When I'm at my best and well is when I'm sleeping. So fully endorse all of the above that Debbie shared around. We've got to think about all our needs, and that there's lots of pockets of things that I do to look after myself. But if it was only one thing, it's 100% for me is sleep.
I'm a big fan of sleep too.
Me too. Yeah. How about you, Lauren?
Tell you what, since I've changed over to my winter duvet, which is so snuggly and warm, I do not want to get out of that bed now. Oh no. My tip would be being brave enough to say no. I know my personal bad habit is trying to shoehorn so many different things into a single day or hour. Actually, sometimes you have to say no and create some space just to relax, just to rest, just to not be running from one thing to another.
I think that's a great one. And that echoes something that Beth said in another episode that she takes part in with us about the price and value of being kind, which sometimes you have to be kind by not doing something or by saying no to something as well. And then the other question was, what makes you smile?
For me, it's really simple. It is watching my dogs play. It's such a lovely bookend to the day when you take the dogs out for a walk and they're just running around, no care in the world, just enjoying themselves. And that just puts the biggest smile on my face.
Lovely.
I have to echo that. My dogs make me laugh every day. They just do such silly things. I have 3 terriers going out for walks, and I think that helps you look after your own well-being. So definitely dogs, big fan.
I'm going to sound like a right sadak now because mine's work related, but the thing that's making me smile at the moment is recognizing, because I also try and shoehorn all of the things into like all of the time, but something that's been really making me smile at the moment is being on top of my calendar and my to-do list. And actually at the end of my working day, at the time when I've decided in advance, right, I'm going to stop working at 6 o'clock tonight or whatever it might be, knowing that when I open my laptop again, I've kind of prepared myself. I don't have to then sit in the evening thinking about, oh, have I sent that email? Have I responded to that person? What do I need to do tomorrow? Am I ready? I've kind of built in preparation time so that when I finish work, I can, this sounds extreme, but switch my brain off completely from it and give my full presence to my partner or my friends or my family or whatever, or myself, like whatever it is that I'm doing that evening. That's feeling really important for me at the moment, and it's definitely giving me a nice big grin as I slam my laptop closed at the end of the day.
Lovely. Thank you, Beth. So the last question as we come to the end of the episode, is there any information sources that you'd like to share about wellbeing or self-care or anything else that we've talked about that you'd like to share with listeners?
If you head to the Transform Lives website, if you jump onto our blogs and our news section, we're always sharing different tips from a both professional and personal perspective on there. Always nice to show the human side of things.
Great. Thanks, Lauren.
I've got 3. Is that okay?
Of course.
I'll make them quick and snappy. Full disclosure, I do some associate work for this consultancy, but I would direct people to the Robertson Cooper website. They're workplace wellbeing specialists. Obviously, that's where I've been talking about wellbeing in that kind of work setting. Science and evidence-based. They do their own research. They've got loads of resources, white papers. So if you're interested in wellbeing in work, that's a really good starting point. I would also say Action for Happiness have amazing resources, particularly their calendars. So I think we've recently had Self-Care September. There was something like Meaningful May. They kind of have a daily invitation, and obviously you don't have to fulfill it every single day if that's too much, but just some provocations and prompts for things that you can do that are going to help look after yourself and promote happiness in your life and those around you. And then my final one, which I'd be remiss not to say, someone who I did my master's in positive psychology and coaching psychology with, Sophie, who is brilliant. That's kind of theory, some reflections and some activities that people can do to bring more joy into their life. So yeah, that felt like a really appropriate one to share. And Sophie's brilliant, so you should look her up anyway.
Lovely. Thanks, Beth.
Well, I can fully endorse the Action for Happiness site. That's very, very good. Have a look at my Bridgeborne Psychology site, because we've got all the links to the shows and anything around positive psychology. I'm a big fan of Martin Seligman. It's well worth having a look at some of his work. And of course, you can get a copy of the Little Book of Kindness from Be the Ripple website.
So last thing is just to say thank you very much for taking part. It's been lovely to spend time with you. Lauren Bailey-Rhodes, thank you.
Thanks, Martin. It's really, really enjoyable conversation this morning. Thank you.
And Beth McManus.
Thank you so much to all of you. And Lauren, I feel like you've given me plenty to go away and reflect on about my own, what am I doing in my own practice to sort of role model a good life. So thank you very much.
Here's this episode's self-care tip.
White Skies Self-Care.
This tip is something to keep to hand when your anxiety levels are high, and it's based on mindfulness. Take a sheet of paper, or your mobile device if you prefer, and make a list of things you enjoy doing or consuming. There's no particular order in which you list the items, and generally about 7 to 10 items is a good number to have. The most important aspect is that you can access these items without help from anyone else. It might be tempting to put something like a cuddle from a loved one on the list, but that isn't suitable as it relies upon the other person being prepared to give you the cuddle. So, for example, my list includes a favourite chilled music playlist that I keep on my mobile phone, a particular bar of chocolate with an intense flavour, the smell and feel of freshly laundered bedsheets, and a specific location in my home where I can lay and watch the clouds drifting by. When you're feeling anxious, select one or more of the favourite items to enjoy. Focus fully on doing or consuming them, remembering why they matter to you. Enjoy and savour them as you feel your anxiety levels reduce.
White Skies Self-Care.
Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed it. And a big thanks to our guests, Beth McManus and Lauren Bailey-Rhodes.
And we'd be delighted if you can join us on our other episodes. And here's a reminder about how you can get in touch and how to access the captioned version of this podcast.
Contact us at linktree/wide skies, where you can also find a link to the captioned version of this podcast.
And it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Guy reached 2-2. Have a safe onward flight.
Wellbeing, inclusion, diversity, equality. Wide Skies, a podcast produced and edited by Majoya Consulting in collaboration with Bridgeborne Psychology.